What they call the dream pods are something new. They have enough room to keep one or two people out of the weather and even offer a little privacy.
In January of 2015, pedestrians walking down North Church Avenue in downtown Tucson, Arizona, noticed something strange on the sidewalk. Lined up near 20 de Agosto Park sat 5 oblong wooden boxes. They looked like oversized coffins, but if you got closer, you would see blankets inside, pillows, personal belongings, and sometimes a person sleeping peacefully behind a locked hatch for the first time in months. They called them dream pods. However, what looked like a small act of kindness on a Tucson sidewalk was about to ignite a legal battle, a political firestorm, and eventually a nationwide movement that would change how America thinks about homelessness. The man behind the dream pods was John McClain, a homeless rights activist who had been leading protests at 20 de Agosto Park since October of 2013. McClain and fellow activist John Cooper believed the city of Tucson was violating the constitutional rights of homeless people by arresting them simply for sleeping in public spaces. Their argument was that sleeping on a sidewalk was a form of protest, protected by the First Amendment. And a federal judge agreed. United States District Court Judge David Berry granted McClain and Cooper an injunction that prevented Tucson police from arresting homeless people for possessing more than 3 items on the sidewalk. The ruling also reinforced their right to sleep near the park as long as they left at least 5 feet of sidewalk open for pedestrians to pass through. That ruling gave McClain the legal cover he needed, because he did not just want people sleeping on concrete, he wanted to give them something better, something with walls, a roof, and a door that could close out the world for a few hours. The wooden pods themselves were donated by a 91-year-old artist and activist from the town of Tombstone. Originally, McClain said the boxes were meant to be large protest signs, impossible to ignore. But once homeless couples started sheltering inside them, the purpose shifted. Every single dream pod, except McClain's own, was occupied by a couple, and that detail mattered enormously because Tucson at that time had 0 shelters that accommodated couples. If you were homeless in Tucson with your partner, the system told you to split up or sleep outside. Those were your only options. The dream pods gave couples a third choice, a tiny wooden box on a sidewalk that, for the people inside it, felt like a home. City Attorney Mike Rankin admitted the situation put the city in a difficult position. Officials had to figure out how to balance public safety concerns with the federal court order protecting the encampment. Meanwhile, the pods kept growing. McClain talked about bringing in sofas, recliners, clothing racks, even a computer station. He wanted to turn the park into a one-stop resource center for the homeless community, but the city eventually pushed back. In March of 2015, after months of legal wrangling, the dream pods were removed. Police and volunteers helped residents cart the wooden shelters onto trailers. The couples who had been sleeping inside them were back to choosing between separation and the sidewalk. McClain received a $20,000 settlement from the city as part of the lawsuit resolution. The park was closed to the public. The dream pods were gone from downtown Tucson. But the idea behind them did not disappear. It spread. And to understand why it spread so fast, you have to understand why traditional homeless shelters fail so many people. Because this part rarely gets talked about on the news. A woman named Amanda McDougald, who was living on the streets of Denver, Colorado, explained it plainly when she finally moved into a tiny home through a pilot program called Beloved Community Village. Amanda has insomnia, PTSD, and high anxiety. Congregate shelters where dozens of strangers sleep in one large room were impossible for her. She was also in recovery, and shelters often housed active drug users right beside people trying to stay sober. The environment worked against everything she was fighting for. Amanda is not unique. Across the country, people avoid shelters because they cannot bring their pets. They cannot stay with their partners. They lose their belongings. They face violence, theft, and chaos in crowded communal sleeping areas. Some shelters require everyone to leave by 6 in the morning regardless of weather, health, or whether they have anywhere to go. Many have strict curfews that conflict with night shift work. And in most cities, the wait lists are so long that by the time a bed opens up, the person who needed it has already moved on or given up trying. For veterans dealing with combat trauma, the noise and unpredictability of a shelter can trigger the same survival responses that kept them alive in a war zone. One unexpected loud noise in the middle of the night, and a veteran is right back in the place they have been trying to leave behind for years. A 2019 study of 64,000 homeless individuals found that people living on the streets reported higher rates of chronic health conditions, trauma, substance misuse, and mental health challenges compared to those who were at least temporarily sheltered. But the shelter system itself was pushing people back onto the streets. The solution was making the problem worse. That gap between what shelters offered and what homeless people actually needed created an opening. And a company from Everett, Washington stepped into it. Pallet was founded in 2016 by Amy King in the middle of a homelessness crisis that was overwhelming cities across the Pacific Northwest. Her mission was simple: build small, durable, lockable shelters that could be assembled quickly and deployed wherever they were needed. A single pallet unit can be put together by a small crew in under an hour. That speed matters when a city has hundreds of people sleeping outside and permanent housing is years away from being built. The basic pallet shelter is 64 square feet. That is an 8x8 room, roughly the size of a walk-in closet. Inside there is space for a cot, a small refrigerator, and personal belongings. The units come with insulation, heating, air conditioning, ADA accessible doorways, and most importantly, a door that locks from the inside. That locking door was the difference between a shelter and a home. A man named Jonathan, living in a Portland pallet shelter, described what it meant in the simplest terms. Before the tiny home, he would leave his tent to eat lunch and come back to find half his belongings stolen. Clothes, medications, documents, all gone. He stopped leaving. He stopped going to appointments. He stopped trying to get help because every time he did, he lost what little he had left. The tiny home gave him something no tent or cardboard box or park bench ever could: security. The ability to leave and come back to a space that was still yours. But getting cities to actually build these villages was a different fight entirely. Portland, Oregon became one of the earliest cities to embrace the pallet model at scale. The city purchased 100 new tiny home pods at a cost of $16,510 each, funded by Federal American Rescue Plan money and Metro's supportive housing funds. Portland eventually established 7 villages filled with the small prefab sleeping pods as a form of transitional housing. Each village offered shared bathrooms, laundry facilities, meals, and connections to social services. And Portland was just the beginning. By the mid-2020s, Pallet had built more than 135 villages across 29 states. Cities like Tampa, Florida, Greensboro, North Carolina, Redondo Beach, California, and Dallas, Texas were all exploring or actively building tiny home communities for their homeless populations. Tampa Hope, operated by Catholic Charities, grew to house 99 shelters with plans to expand to nearly 190 by the middle of 2025. The Redondo Beach Village, with just 21 shelters, helped 156 residents per year transition into permanent housing after it opened in 2021. In Baldwin Park, California, 28 shelters helped 360 people reach stable housing. These are not massive numbers, but they are real people with real addresses and real doors that lock at night. And for each of those individuals, the trajectory of their life changed direction. And if this story has you thinking about someone in your life who is going through something like this, or if you just want to know what programs and resources actually exist, I put together a guide called The Veteran's Blueprint. I linked it in the description. It covers the real stuff, the practical steps and programs that I honestly cannot get into on this channel without risking the whole thing getting taken down. Whether you are a veteran, a family member, or someone who wants to help, It is there for you. Because what happened in Austin, Texas, might be the most important part of this entire story. The largest and most ambitious tiny home project in the entire country sits on the outskirts of Austin, just beyond the city limits in Travis County. It is called Community First Village, and it was founded by a man named Alan Graham through his nonprofit organization, Mobile Loaves and Fishes. Graham started small. He helped set up one homeless man with a recreational vehicle to live in. Then he did the same for a few more people. By 2012, he had secured 27 acres of land to build what would become the first phase of the village. And from that modest beginning, something extraordinary grew. As of October 2025, Community First Village celebrated its 10th anniversary. The community now spans 51 acres and houses more than 470 residents in a mix of tiny homes, family homes, and RVs. Eclectic little houses are clustered around shared outdoor kitchens. Neat rows of manufactured homes line looping cul-de-sacs. There are communal meals, movie screenings, and on-site jobs for residents who want to work. There is a blacksmith shop, an art studio, and a car repair garage where residents earn income doing real work for the community. Justin Tyler Jr., a 41-year-old resident, moved into a 200-square-foot tiny house in the fall of 2022. Inside his home, there is a kitchenette, a bed, and a recliner. He now works at the village, preparing homes for the dozen or more people who move there every month. For Justin, the routine matters as much as the roof. He has a schedule. He has neighbors who know his name. He has a reason to wake up in the morning. The retention rate at Community First Village is 88%. Nearly 9 out of 10 people who move in stay housed. And these are not people who simply had a run of bad luck. Alan Graham told city and county leaders at the 10th anniversary celebration that 90% of his residents are dealing with traumatic brain injuries, alcohol and drug addiction, or severe mental health challenges. These are people the traditional system gave up on, and they are thriving. Austin Mayor Kirk Watson called the village a model of belonging. Graham's nonprofit has announced plans to build up to 500 additional tiny homes over the next 5 years, expanding to nearly 2,000 homes across 178 acres at 3 locations. If completed, it would become by far the largest project of its kind in the United States, big enough to permanently house roughly half of Austin's chronically homeless population. But zoom out from Austin, and the bigger picture is troubling. In January of 2024, the Department of Housing and Urban Development conducted its annual point-in-time count and found that 771,480 Americans were experiencing homelessness on a single night. That is the highest number ever recorded since HUD began tracking homelessness in 2007. To put that in perspective, that is more people than live in the entire city of Seattle. It represents an 18% jump from the previous year. Nearly 150,000 of those people were children. Families with children saw a 39% increase. Chronic homelessness hit record levels too, with over 152,000 people meeting HUD's definition of long-term, ongoing homelessness. California alone accounted for 187,000 people without housing, nearly a quarter of the national total. Rising rents, the end of pandemic-era eviction protections, the expiration of emergency rental assistance, and in Hawaii, the Maui wildfires, all pushed more people into homelessness than at any point in modern American history. But in the middle of all that devastation, there was exactly one group that saw their numbers go down: veterans. On that same January night in 2024, 32,882 veterans were experiencing homelessness. That is a decrease of nearly 8% from the year before and a drop of more than 55% since 2010. Veterans were the only population that improved while every other group got worse. The reason is not complicated. It is money and focus. The Department of Veterans Affairs housed nearly 48,000 veterans in fiscal year 2024 alone, surpassing its own goal by almost 17%. Over the previous 3 years, the VA had permanently housed more than 133,000 veterans. And 96% of the veterans who were housed through these programs did not return to homelessness. That number is worth sitting with. 96% stayed housed. Programs like HUD-VASH, the Supportive Services for Veteran Families grants, and the Grant and Per Diem program poured targeted funding into the problem. The VA awarded more than $800 million in grants specifically for veteran homelessness in 2024. Los Angeles alone permanently housed over 1,800 homeless veterans that year, the most of any city in the country for the third year in a row. When you invest real money, build real infrastructure, and wrap real services around people, homelessness is solvable. Not easy, not overnight, but solvable. And that is exactly what the tiny home movement is betting on. In Denver, the beloved community village became a first-of-its-kind pilot program in Colorado, housing 13 people in 11 tiny homes with shared showers, a library, and a community garden. For Amanda McDougald, the woman who could not sleep in congregate shelters, the tiny home changed everything about her recovery. She had her own space. She could close the door. She could sleep without one eye open. PJ D'Amico, the executive director of the Buck Foundation that helped launch the village, said the goal was dignity. The sweeps had become so terrible, the constant police raids forcing homeless people to move their tents every few days, that organizers realized they had to create spaces that were still outside the traditional shelter system, but where people could feel safe and treated like human beings. In Los Angeles, 9 tiny home villages with a total of 1,217 beds have opened since February of 2021, using 64 square-foot pallet shelters paired with shared bathrooms, laundry, security, meals, and social workers. The average cost per bed across those LA villages came out to roughly $42,000. For comparison, a single unit of permanent supportive housing in Los Angeles can cost over $500,000 to build. The tiny homes are not a replacement for that housing, but they can be deployed in months instead of years, and for a fraction of the price. And the movement is still accelerating. Since 2019, the number of tiny home villages across the country has nearly quadrupled, from 34 communities to over 124, with dozens more in the planning stages. Researcher Yetimoni Kapibi at Missouri State University tracked the expansion and found that the pace of new village construction is speeding up, not slowing down. But not everyone is cheering. Critics argue that tiny homes are a band-aid, that 8x8 foot boxes with no kitchens or bathrooms are not real housing, that the money spent on prefab pods would be better invested in permanent, affordable apartments, that tiny home villages concentrate poverty and create miniature ghettos that cities will eventually want to tear down. Some residents near proposed village sites have fought construction with every tool available, filing zoning complaints, attending city council meetings, and organizing petitions. In some cities, the fight over where to put these villages has lasted longer than it took to build them. They are not entirely wrong about the challenges. Tiny homes were never designed to be permanent solutions. Jeff Edens, who oversees Portland's shelter programs, put it directly. The program was not meant to last forever. It is meant to be a bridge from the streets to stability. But for a growing number of Americans, that bridge is the difference between sleeping on asphalt and sleeping behind a door that locks, between being woken up by police as though you are a criminal and having an address where your mail can arrive, between losing everything you own every time you leave to find food and knowing your belongings will be there when you get back. Katie Helam was 20 years old when she and her 19-year-old fiancé Logan Foster moved into one of John McClane's original dream pods on the corner of West Congress Street and South Church Avenue in downtown Tucson. Their feet hung out the end of the wooden box. It was cramped. It was not pretty. It was not permanent. But for a young couple with nowhere else to go, it was the first space they could call theirs. They could close the hatch, and for a few hours, the world outside stopped mattering. The dream pods are gone from Tucson's sidewalks now, But in their place, across hundreds of American cities, thousands of small doors with small locks are clicking shut tonight. And behind each one, someone who spent last month on the street is closing their eyes in something that feels, even for just a moment, like home. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes knowing that people out there are building something better is enough to hold on one more day.